Hey everybody, RPG here. Today we're going to dive into part 2 of the Anbernic RG351MP Handheld video game console review. So in part 1, I dove into everything, tested everything out using the stock firmware and cards that are included with the handheld when you purchase it. So we were able to jump into a wide range of collections, but the collections I really wanted to focus on are the ones that usually stress out the Anbernic products, and that's Dreamcast, N64, and PSP. So in those collections that are included on the cards that come with the handheld, you're very limited. You don't have a lot of games to choose from. N64, for example, I think had only 4 titles on there. So while the titles did perform quite well, I did run into slight little audio glitches and little hiccups on screen. So I wanted to test out more games to get a better understanding of where the performance lies with this particular handheld. So I created my own card. It's got over 36,500 retro video games included on it. So it's just a massive card. And for these particular collections, we're able to test out a much wider range of games. So I've put together a couple different demo videos for each of these collections so we could jump in and check out some games and test out the performance of the Anbernic RG351MP in these different collections. So we're going to jump into N64, we're going to jump into Dreamcast, we're going to jump into PSP. I've chosen a couple games that I think are really great ways to test out the performance too, games that aren't super easy to emulate in most cases, so we'll get a good understanding as to where the performance kind of lies on here and where it maxes out. So let's jump into these demos and then we'll jump back here and talk about what we experienced.
with a new lap record.
All right, so we jumped into these demos here. So I want to first start off with N64. So N64, right off the bat, is one of the harder collections to emulate, not just on handhelds, but on regular console setups as well. So if you take a Raspberry Pi 4, for example, you're typically only able to get into about 75% of your titles. Same thing here. We're pretty much going to be able to get into, I'd say, about 70 to 75% of titles. Some of them are just a little bit too advanced for what we can handle with, everything that we have going on behind the scenes on this particular handheld. So we jumped into Mario Kart 64 here. I thought this would be a good title to jump into because most of us are really familiar with this game. We know how it's supposed to perform, so we can really gauge the level of performance here when jumping into it. So I did notice little hiccups and stuff leading into games and out of games. Also some slight little audio hiccups as well. Little garbled bits of audio here and there, but for the most part, it's in screens where we're loading into like a game or loading out of a game. So in the actual parts where we're actually playing the game, everything ran really nicely here. I didn't really experience any issues whatsoever. So, I'm not so worried about little hiccups and whatnot leading in and out of games, as long as the actual gameplay experience is top notch, and it is here. So there's obviously going to be some titles that just don't perform well for N64. GoldenEye is one where I tested it out. I didn't include it here because I'm trying to keep this video short and sweet, but GoldenEye, for example, it's pretty laggy. It's really not an enjoyable experience for me, but there's also going to be some N64 games, and GoldenEye is one of them, where the controls just don't transfer over to a handheld well. If we think about an N64 controller, it's very specific. There's not much else out there like that at all. So when we take those controls on an original N64 controller and we transfer them over to a handheld, sometimes it just doesn't translate and it just doesn't create a gameplay experience that really works. So if we think about this particular handheld, we have our two shoulder and trigger buttons on each side, and on a N64 controller, we only have one Z trigger, and then obviously we have shoulders. So transferring all that stuff over, you're obviously going to be having some functions from the regular gamepad controller moved up to the shoulder and trigger buttons on there. It just gets a little bit tough to play. So I find that simpler games like Mario Kart 64 and stuff like that really do work nicely because you're not overwhelming the handheld with different control options. With GoldenEye, you have a lot going on, and it just doesn't transfer over well to the handheld, even if you got past the lags and stuff like that. And you adjusted frame rates and stuff like that. But even when doing custom stuff like that, it really doesn't work super well. So there's going to be those titles that you just want to pass on with this particular handheld. So let's jump into Dreamcast now. For Dreamcast, we jumped into a couple titles. We jumped into Dynamite Cop, which is a great game that ran flawlessly. Same sort of deal though. There's little audio glitches here and there, but it's mostly in between scenes, or like starting up a cutscene or ending a cutscene, stuff like that. The actual gameplay ran really nicely. And then we also jumped into Star Wars, the pod racing game, which is one of my favorites. And I chose this game because it's a really fast-paced game, a whole lot going on. You're constantly, dodging obstacles and taking quick, sharp turns. Just a lot going on in this game. And it's really hard to actually emulate this game on Raspberry Pi 4 and different emulation platforms out there with different computers. So the fact that it actually runs pretty flawlessly on this handheld says a lot about the performance level of this handheld. So we jumped into this game. Everything was pretty much on point. Really enjoyed the gameplay there. And I want to actually add to this, I don't want to focus too much on the controls and layout of the controls here in this video because I covered all that in the part 1, but with this particular title, when I'm navigating with the analog sticks, I just found them to be exceptional. I'm always notorious for overcorrecting and stuff like that. And in this particular game, when I play with an original N64 controller, whether I'm playing on some sort of emulation platform or on the original console itself, I'm all over the place steering the pod in this game. So the fact that I was just on point throughout says a whole lot about the analog sticks on here. They're just phenomenal. The quality is amazing, but the performance is really top notch on here. So I'd love to take credit and say that I'm just amazing at this game. I got first place in here, set some records on the handheld itself, but it's not me at all. It's really those analog sticks, the fact that you can just take those turns and just be on point says a lot about the handheld. So I just want to take a minute and give them props where it's due here for that. So moving on from Dreamcast, well, before I move on, you're probably going to be in the same situation with Dreamcast as N64, where I'd say probably about 75% of your games are going to work on here, and the other 25 to maybe 20% are just going to be a little too much for this particular handheld to handle. You might run into flickering backgrounds, stuff like that. But some of those games are playable if you don't mind the like strobe light sort of effects and stuff. We can go into settings and kind of customize minor things to make it better, but some titles are just going to be, a little too much for the experience to be really enjoyable. So same sort of deal here. You're going to get into the majority of your games for this particular Dreamcast collection, but don't be surprised if one of your favorite games that's more advanced doesn't work well. So 75 to 80%, I'd say, but that is a higher number than what I've seen on previous Anbernic handhelds. So moving on to PSP now. Previously on Anbernic products with PSP's collection, you're typically at that like 50% at best, where 50% of games work, 50% of games don't work. I'd say here you're probably at about 60% success rate, where 60% of your games work. When I jumped into Virtua Tennis, this was a game that works really smoothly in the gameplay. Now in like cutscenes and stuff like that, it does get a little glitchy. I was trying to save time here when jumping into this demo, and I'll actually have some full videos that show, longer demos of these, same games and stuff. So I'll put links in the description of this video when I get those out as well. So it'll be like, maybe like a 10-minute stretch. So it's not as brief as it is here in this video, but for the most part, I kind of skipped over the in-between scenes. When you make a play in Virtua Tennis and either you win or you lose, it shows like a little cutscene of the different characters that you're, either playing or facing in the game. So I skipped over those, but those do get a little glitchy. Same sort of deal as the previous collections. In and out of gameplay scenes, you do run into like a slight little lag or glitch or whatever, but again, doesn't really interfere with the gameplay experience in any way. So really was quite happy with this. And the other one I'd like to mention is Ridge Racer. Now I didn't jump into that title here in this video, but I did in the first video. And the performance of that game is exceptional. And that's another game that's very similar to some of the other racing games we jumped into here, because it's a whole lot going on. A lot of speed in the game, obstacles, quick turns, all that stuff that really stresses out a system. So the fact that that game works on the stock card as well as on the card that I've put together is a solid indication that the performance is kicked up a few notches here on the Anbernic RG351MP. So definitely across the board with these three collections, we're definitely seeing a solid step up in terms of the performance from that of the previous Anbernic handhelds. So it's not a major step forward where, all the games are working flawlessly, but I definitely see improvement, and I definitely see that Anbernic is heading in the right direction. So I definitely would recommend this particular Anbernic product over the previous ones that they put out in the past. They have the RG351M, RG351P, RG351V, and some other ones that came out prior to those. And all of the performances are pretty good, but they definitely took a solid step forward with these three collections on the MP. So I would definitely recommend it over the previous versions. So that's really gonna do it for today. Just wanted to focus on these three collections and really nail down a solid idea as to what the performance is like on this particular product. So that's gonna do it for today. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, hit me up in the comment section below. Always happy to help you guys out any way I possibly can. If you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, smash the like button for me. If you haven't yet subscribed to the RetroPie Guy YouTube channel, you can go ahead and do that in the bottom right corner of this video. Just click the subscribe button and you'll be in the loop for all future videos that I put out. I do a ton of stuff on here for retro gaming. We do product reviews, gameplay demos, tutorials. I have the Forgotten Favorites YouTube series every Monday and Thursday night. And I'll be adding some new stuff in the very near future as well. So a whole lot going on here. Definitely subscribe if you haven't already. And definitely check us out online, www.retroPieGuy.com. Thanks for watching today.